Everybody had a good weekend. This is the last Grand Rounds session for the academic calendar for this year. We will be taking June, July, and August off from Grand Rounds. The next department-wide gathering is graduation, which is June 12th. Is that right, Courtney? Make sure I got the right date. June 12th, and it's down at the DCPA again this year. Today we have two faculty speakers to start us out. Dr. Conzen, who is an associate professor in the Division of Transplant, and by way of introductions, she did her undergraduate degree at the University of California in Davis, and then finished her MD in 2006 at UCSF before she went to St. Louis, where she did her training at Washington University. She did a research fellowship during her general surgery residency and was the administrative chief resident there, finishing in 2013 before she went on to do her transplant fellowship and spent time at MSK in New York during that time. Faculty appointments, she came here in 2015 as an assistant professor and then was promoted 3 years ago in 2023 to associate professor. Nationally, she chairs the Fellowship Training Committee at the American Society of Transplant Surgeons and was the chair of the Fellows Symposium in 2024. Locally, she's won some teaching awards back at Washington University and was given the Golden Apple Award for Teacher of the Year here in the Department of Surgery in 2023. She's published 43 different publications and given a total of 31 presentations. And today she's going to talk to us a little bit about culture and leadership. Dr. Conzen.
Thank you, Dr. McIntyre. All right, can you hear me? Okay, it's a pleasure to be here with you today. I'm going to stand a little closer because this talk requires some audience involvement, and lucky for you, you're one of like 30 in the audience. So I actually rolled off the Fellowship Training Committee a couple years ago for the ASTS, but they invited me back last year to give a talk on culture and leadership. And when I first got the invitation, I thought, well, why me? And then two, I thought, what does this really mean to me? I spent a few nights kind of mulling it over and then several weeks. And ultimately, it boiled down to one question. How do you want to feel when you go to work? So shout it out. How do you want to feel? Ready to help, excited, successful. How about happy, energized, invigorated, inspired? You want to feel like this, right? And no, I didn't steal this from the elevator. But this is what you want to feel. So what influences how you feel? Fair enough, the amount of sleep you get. What else? I didn't hear that. Outcomes, okay. Teamwork. What about the people around you, right? How you're being treated. So essentially what we're talking about is culture. Workplace culture is the phenomena of how people treat each other and how they work together in teams. Colloquially, we say it's how we do things around here. More formally, it's the shared beliefs, normative values, social practices that are so ingrained and intrinsic that we don't even think twice about them. They're second nature. There can be bad culture, there can be good culture, and a lot somewhere in between. But when we think about culture that is negative, we think about an environment that makes us feel stressed, disengaged, disenfranchised. It makes us pull back, and sometimes it can progress to a situation where it's a hostile work environment or a toxic work environment, and it makes you feel like you're at the end of the road. This is Badlands, South Dakota. And there have been studies that have shown that it is actually more stressful to be in a toxic work environment than it is to be unemployed, both mentally and physically. So if we're in a supportive environment, a positive environment, these are the things that we feel. all the things that we were just talking about with the first question that I asked. And so when people feel supported and inspired and engaged, they band together. They identify problems that we commonly face. You collaborate, you try to work together to come up with creative solutions, and you essentially develop this team that you know you can rely on no matter what. And so that leads to the concept of the circle of safety. And I put the Avengers up here because sometimes it feels like we are getting it from all directions, whether it's new government policies, administrative metrics that maybe don't quite make sense for our overlying objectives, insurance companies, sometimes it's OR inefficiencies and a number of other things. But when we band together and we have this safe inner core group, we develop resilience, and which is important for my next question, which is why does organizational culture matter? And it's because when we have a strong culture, it allows organizations to survive and withstand the external forces that are extremely strong. Take, for example, the Tylenol crisis in 1982. Half of you weren't even born. But Johnson & Johnson faced a situation where someone was lacing extra strength Tylenol capsules with cyanide. It resulted in 7 deaths in the Chicago area, including a child. There were a lot of people who felt that Johnson & Johnson should try and sweep it under the rug or blame external factors. They thought that Johnson & Johnson would probably fold as a result of this crisis. But CEO James Burke took a different approach. He and his team, his core team, went back to the company credo and thought, how do we best handle this for what's most important for us? And that was to take ownership of the problem. They sent out mass communications. They made everything they were doing as transparent as possible. And at the expense of several $100 million, which in the early 1980s was probably on the order of billions, they recalled millions of Tylenol capsules. People thought they were going to go bankrupt as a result of this maneuver, but in the end, they emerged stronger than ever. They're a household name that's still around 45 years later and probably not disappearing anytime soon. But James Burke and his team are lauded in business schools all around for how they managed this crisis. And so it comes down to the team. And this matters in healthcare too, not just in the pharmaceutical industry. But it has been shown that organizational culture in healthcare is linked to provider attitude and happiness. It's linked to patient experience, and it's linked to patient outcomes. We have a tendency to want to recruit top people based on what they've accomplished throughout their careers and how they can further add to the shiny allure of the institutions that we work in, whether it's private hospitals, academic hospitals. But I would propose that what we really need to do is look at what a person can contribute to a team and how they can elevate a team when they join the group. This is one of my favorite quotes. It's by Ed Catmull, the president and co-founder of Pixar. Give a good idea to a mediocre team, and they'll find a way to screw it up. Give a mediocre idea to a good team, and they'll find a way to make it better. So culture is a shared experience by all members. It might not be obvious when people are coming to visit, but it's immediately felt as soon as you join that group. And it can take a long time to change. There can be an insidious erosion of good culture over time. Similarly, if there's bad culture, it can take a while to change. So how do we change it? I also propose this to you, that anyone at any level can start the change. Each one of us has the ability to affect the culture in which we're working. But it does require that we establish psychological safety. And Dr. Tarpley alluded to this a couple weeks ago. And Dr. Agarwala mentioned this in his talk to the faculty last Thursday when he was talking about ways to further increase perioperative safety for our patients. Psychological safety is created when and is felt when everyone on a team feels valued, that they feel they can speak up, ask for help, admit mistakes, challenge the status quo when it's not perfect without fear of retribution or humiliation. Honesty is valued. It's an environment that leads to dialogue, collaboration, and continuous improvement. So when you have psychological safety, this is when you get that circle of safety that we were just talking about. When there is low psychological safety, when it doesn't exist, people are either apathetic or anxious, neither of which are good. It causes people to disengage, to not be proactive, to not care, to not want to help make things better. But when we have high psychological safety and we are in a setting such as we are with high expectations for performance, that's when we enter what's called the learning zone. That's when we have more of a growth mindset. Failures are not criticized, they're not berated, but instead we look at them as an opportunity to figure out how to improve, how to build on the failure to get to the success. So how do we build psychological safety? I mentioned that everyone needs to feel that they have a voice. They need to feel that they are a valuable member of the team. It's important that we are there for each other and we truly listen. A lot of us sit in the small meetings and we're looking at our phones, we're looking at our laptops, we're not really participating in the conversations. But you need to show that you care and you need to show that you're really listening and you need to engage in the dialogue. Overdo the thank yous. There's no thing that is too small to appreciate, especially when we're doing it for the patients. So make sure you say thank you to everyone, appreciate them. And we don't always have the right answer, so acknowledge uncertainty, acknowledge when you don't know which course is best to take. Model fallibility. So when you do make a mistake, own up to it and invite others to help. Invite them to also admit their mistakes and learn from them. We tend to want to shoot the messenger, right? But really, what we should be doing is fostering this open communication, which means we should be embracing the messenger when there is bad news or there's a systems problem with how we're doing things in the hospital. This next one, for the rugby fans in the group, a good team dynamic and a safe team environment requires everyone on the team to contribute. It takes just one person to ruin that dynamic. It takes everyone to make it good. It takes one to make it bad. And so the New Zealand All Blacks have a rule, no dickheads. I might be the first one to say that in Grand Rounds. But it's true. And then avoid giving the feedback sandwich. This is something I was taught to do in med school and residency, and it really confuses the message. So when you want someone to improve upon something, just be direct, be polite, be direct, but have a productive conversation. But when someone does something really well, celebrate that moment, distinguish it, make it its own moment to celebrate, and then pick up the trash. How many of us leave the empty bags in the isolation carts? Probably half of you. So take the time, take a few seconds and throw it away. Show that nothing is too small for you to do. We all work together. Let's all make it a clean environment. Let's all take care of the patients. So when we establish this, then we earn the trust of others. And Jeff Pulzer at the Harvard Business School kind of published this concept of the vulnerability loop, where you extend trust in others and you ask them to trust you by showing your vulnerability, by showing your imperfections and working together. And once you have that, then people relax together and learn to enjoy the team dynamic. So, audience participation again. What defines a leader? Vision. Someone who creates a vision. What else? Dr. Willauer. Leads by example. I'll give them credit for it. It can mean a number of things, but I think we can all agree that it's more than just a title, right? So John Quincy Adams, I think, said it very eloquently. If your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, you are a leader. Simon Sinek wrote in his book about leadership, great leaders put the team above themselves. So they're not in it just to make themselves famous. They're not in it for all the credit. They want to elevate the team and each member and get them to the next level. And so for the trainees in the audience, there's multiple different pathways, so to speak, to leadership, learning how to become a good leader. Most of us learn from the people around us, from the mentors that we've had over time. We learn how to do it well and how not to do it well. You can read plenty of self-help books, personal development books. You can engage with a leadership coach. And all of our professional societies offer leadership development courses. People always ask about leadership styles, and I think most of us will stare at the screen and put us in one of the circles up here. But I think that the best leaders are the ones who are adaptable. So one leadership style doesn't fit all circumstances, and the best leaders are those who can change their style to what the team is demanding at the time and what the situation is demanding. So when we talk about culture, and we talk about how to improve culture, there is a simple truth about people who become great leaders. They step up. It doesn't start at the top. We can't sit around and wait for the culture to change. We have to make it happen. It starts with each of us and our own personal attitudes and behaviors. So for the last part of my talk, I want to discuss how each of us every day can demonstrate small acts of leadership, can show it. The first is believe in yourself. Start by being the person that you want to work for. I think this is as powerful a statement as how do you want to feel when you go to work in the morning. You have to build confidence in those around you. So the first half of this talks about all the things we've already mentioned, but it also involves providing some autonomy to all members of the team, giving them a sense of ownership and accountability, honoring and learning from everyone's differences. So we're all different. We all have different opinions. We all have different perspectives, different backgrounds, different educations. We should embrace that, acknowledge that, and try to work to everyone's strengths. And then we can move a common agenda forward. So I mentioned that we need to be fully present. And then empathy, understanding the other's perspective. So how many of you have been yelled at some phase in your training or your career? How many of you have yelled? Yeah. If we step back for a moment, we realize that a lot of times there's more behind the yelling than the immediate issue at hand, right? There's something else driving it. And so I encourage you to try and practice empathy. Try and understand what that other person is seeing, thinking, feeling, doing. And so before you lash out next time, just take a moment, pause, take a deep breath, ask yourself, why are you lashing out? Is there something else driving this? And how can you make it a more productive encounter? I've talked a lot about vulnerability already. We've all been in an operating room situation where things aren't going according to textbook. Things aren't going according to the plan, and maybe we don't have the answer. That's a situation when we definitely should be inviting the input of those that are working with us. And if we still don't have the answer, then invite the input outside the OR. But a classic example of this is United Flight 232 that took off from Denver in 1989. It was headed for Chicago, and the tail engine exploded and cut both the main and backup hydraulic lines, a situation that was predicted only to happen 1 in a billion instances. And so flight training schools never even tested this in simulators. There happened to be 4 very experienced people on this flight. There was a pilot, a captain, Al Haynes, who had logged more than 30,000 hours of flight time. His co-pilot had logged more than 20,000 hours of flight time. There was a flight engineer who knew the insides of the plane better than anyone else. And then there was a pilot trainer who was responsible for doing all the flight simulations to train for emergency situations. And so the latter 2 guys asked if they were needed in the cockpit when they sensed that something clearly wasn't wrong. And these 4 men spoke in these brief bits of information exchange, kind of almost like staccato type sentences. And they managed to crash land in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, but they saved 185 people on that flight. There were a number that died, but 185 people were saved. These men are credited for their communication and their willingness to work together, and the captain being able to say, I don't know what's going on and I don't know how to fix it, but I know that we can't fly and we can't land. The National Transportation and Safety Board did 28 simulations of this exact scenario after the fact, and not once did any group that was part of that manage to get the plane anywhere close to Sioux Falls, and everyone died every time. So put the team first. We've talked about this a lot already, but this is another good one from Simon Sinek. Leaders protect those on the ground, and those on the ground are willing to protect and defend each other. He was talking about it in reference to military operations, but this is applicable to pretty much every aspect of what we do and the teams that we work in. You don't want people to get bored, so introduce challenge, stimulate thought, stimulate improvement, innovation. How many of you have heard of the Red Balloon Challenge? This was in your lifetimes. It was back in 2009. So the Department of Defense was trying to figure out new ways of communicating and working in extenuating circumstances, disaster zones, when groups are spread far apart, looking at new kind of communications networks. And so the research agency for the Department of Defense, called DARPA, decided that they were going to place 10 red balloons around the country, and they were going to see who could find them the fastest. And so a lot of the government contractors, private companies invested a lot of resources trying to build communication networks, tracking devices, location devices. 4 days before the balloons were released, a group of students at MIT heard about the challenge. They had no financial resources, no support. They really didn't have any physical resources either. But they figured that what they were going to do was take the $40,000 reward that was being offered to the group that located all 10 balloons, and they were going to share it with everyone that they engaged in this network that they were trying to build to locate the balloons. And so they said that anyone who found a balloon would get $2,000. The person who recruited the spotter of the balloon would get half that. The recruiter of the recruiter would get half that. And they sent out a mass communication on social media. In less than 4 days before the balloons were released, they managed to get 5,000 people in their communication network. The Department of Defense was predicting that it would take up to a week to spot all these balloons. And in fact, it took 8 hours and 50 minutes, and the MIT group won. I think it just goes to show, back to that earlier quote, that it's not about the idea that makes the team reach, it's about the team that improves on the idea and how to achieve what they want. We are all very different people. We've all taken Myers-Briggs tests. But when you're on a team and you're leading a team, it's important to understand that not every person functions the same way. So try to understand the personalities that are on your team and assign tasks and in a way that optimizes that person's strengths. You have to have grit. For those of you who don't know, this is Dr. Tom Starzl, father of liver transplantation. He started his career here, and he had a lot of failures before he ultimately had a successful liver transplant. He is the icon of perseverance, and he encouraged his teams through a lot of failures to stick with him and to get it done. Defy convention. Get rid of the rules that don't make sense. So there's a lot of things that we do in medicine because we've been doing it for 20 or 30 years. If it's not working anymore, it's okay to work to change it. Just do it in a way that builds consensus and you don't upset too many people. As Nancy Asher, transplant surgeon and former chair at UCSF, once said at a conference that we were hosting, never have more than 2 enemies at the same time. And then remember the 5 to 1 rule, that negative comments and interactions are so powerful, toxic, and lasting that it takes roughly 5 positive interactions to offset the negative one. I don't know about you, but this also works in my home. If I upset my husband, it takes like 5 more positive interactions to get him talking to me again. All right, so we're all gonna falter in our leadership capacity. And so what do? You own up to it. You apologize, write yourself with your guiding principles, and you continue to move forward. Smile. Okay, so I unfortunately have RBF, and I'm also an introvert. And so I used to walk through the halls with my head down, wanting to get from point A to point B as fast as I possibly could, not looking anyone in the eye. And a couple years ago, I decided that I was gonna lift up my head, make eye contact, and smile at everyone I passed, whether I knew them or didn't. And it was amazing how many smiles I got back and how good that made me feel. And it's actually, so surgeons, let me back up and say that surgeons thrive on endorphins and dopamine, right? We get immediate gratification, dopamine release when we do a great case, everyone's high-fiving. But when we witness acts of kindness and gratitude or show acts of kindness ourselves, it actually releases oxytocin, which is not just the mama's hormone, but it's a long-acting hormone that keeps us feeling good and happy and calm for an extended period of time. And it's been shown, smiling causes oxytocin release. So remember that, smile. Shoot the shit. We're in the OR for long periods of time. Get to know the people that you're working with side by side, day in and day out. It makes it more pleasant. You function better together, and it's far more enjoyable. Recognize not only the extraordinary, but also the ordinary. Continue to inspire. This was one of our living liver donors who donated to a boy he didn't know. And then all of this takes a lot out of us, and it's okay to take a break. We need to refresh, reset. So remember to do that. And for the trainees in the audience, you are the next generation of surgeons. You are the future. Go be the best that you can be. Every day, we should all work to be the best that we can be. Thank you.
I'm going to express my gratitude to you because I love talks that reinforce all of my biases, and you reinforced all my biases this morning.